All right, it's hot. It's been a hell of a week. I figured I'd do a little sit-down video talking about something I've mentioned in prior videos in terms of how I personally conceptualize martial arts. Now, caveats to get out of the way. As always, I don't consider myself any kind of master, expert, anything like that. Caveat 2, I never intend to contradict anything that you may be learning, studying, practicing. If I can add something useful to the conversation, fantastic. Let me know in the comments. Caveat 3, nothing I am presenting or showing you is ever intended to be taken as the teaching of any traditional system. And I've studied a lot of them. I've said this over and over again. And kind of combined them, hybridized them into what works for me. Now, in that, I take what I call a top-down approach. I start with some fundamental principles, philosophies, strategies, concepts that then inform, direct, connect all of the, little stuff at the bottom of, you can consider it a pyramid. Now, there are a lot of schools out there that focus on, the little stuff, the individual techniques and minutia and things like that, and they may take a long time to get around to the big stuff that connects them and makes them work. And that might be due to maybe the difference between the open door, closed door philosophy. Talked about that before, making sure your students are dedicated and trustworthy before you give them something that actually is functional. Or maybe the instructors themselves never really learned it. I've certainly seen some questionable practices out there. I'm not going to name any, but yeah, people throw around the word bullshito a lot. It makes me wonder if they have any concept of, actual personal combat or anything like that. But again, I have said many times there's value in even traditional systems that don't seem to have any pragmatic use. Yeah, there's still value in those systems. And I myself am still learning and absorbing more and more information all the time. But let's talk about a couple of my big top of the pyramid concepts. Kind of like another way to look at it would be if you're making a jigsaw puzzle, it's definitely helpful to have the picture on the box before you try to put all those pieces together, right? You know how much fun it is if you don't have that picture. Okay, so at the top of my pyramid, two major concepts for me. What I personally call my 4 priorities and also my 4 stages of reaction. All right, to start with the 4 priorities, kind of my ethical philosophy of personal combat. For me, I have to tell a story, and this may or may not be true. I've heard different versions of it. But the story goes like this, that in the various Buddhist and Taoist temples, specifically Buddhist temples in this case, that train famously martial arts, we can pick a Japanese version or a Chinese version. Let's pick Shaolin, for instance. Again, I can't testify that this is a true story at all or just a useful anecdote. One of the things they say about good stories is they don't need to actually be true to still be, true. The story goes like this. Student, disciple, acolyte, asks his master, if our spiritual, philosophical, religious beliefs say that we should not harm other life, that we must respect all life, why are we practicing an art that is, kind of the opposite? We are practicing fighting and combat. We may be using weapons, practicing techniques that are lethal, that destroy life. That doesn't make any sense. The master's answer was this, basically. That if you want to honestly respect, revere, preserve all life, first, start with your own. Especially if, what you're doing with your life might take you into danger. It's a dangerous world, dangerous people. And as we talk about in the stages of reaction later, protecting yourself is one of the, first skill levels to master. There's certainly ways to do that, including avoiding the fight. Protect yourself as your first priority. Then, as you develop your skill at that, you get better at it. The next priority, because you are a caring, empathetic human being, I hope, that does have a mandate to respect, preserve, revere all life, you're probably going to want to try to defend other people from those that would harm them, right? But in order to do that, you have to put yourself in harm's way, which means you better be darn good at protecting yourself. We'll talk about that in stages of reaction, what makes that even harder. You can no longer avoid the danger. You have to actually put yourself in the way to do that. So you better be good at it. If you want to protect other people, you have to be really good at first, protecting yourself. So protect yourself, defend others. Now, if you study and train in your art, and this is actually your ideal, to do no harm, if you get to the point where you feel like, and it varies given the situation, you never know what to expect and what kind of a situation you're going to be in, what the threat level is. But if you train and practice and you feel like in the situation that you're in, you can protect yourself, defend other people, can you do that well enough that you can then preserve the life of your enemy, the person that's attacking you or them? Do you have to do them harm? Can you protect yourself, priority 1, defend others, priority 2, take those first. Can you then take it to the next step and also not do unnecessary harm to the enemy? All right. That's worth training. If you want to simply learn how to kill other human beings, we have tools for that. You can go to the store and buy one and train with it. But studying for decades upon decades, perfecting your skills, developing those skills, you work your way through the priorities, being able to protect yourself from the conceivable kinds of harm you might encounter. It's a lifetime endeavor. And then get good enough at it that you feel confident that you could potentially protect other people, defend them in dangerous situations, which puts you at a much greater risk of harm, so you better be better at it. And then if you can really, really develop a high level of skill, maybe, depending on the situation, you might feel like you, might not have to kill or seriously harm that other person, that enemy, that attacker. If you can really do, those 3 things, then you can honestly protect, preserve, revere all life. All right, 4 priorities followed by 4 stages of reaction, which I will attempt to demonstrate in more live applications. But the general concepts are these, based on what we've kind of talked about in the priorities. Priority 1, protect yourself. Priority 2, if you're good at protecting yourself, maybe you can defend other people. Priority 3, if you're good at the first 2, maybe you don't have to harm the enemy unduly. Priority 4, if you can do all of those 3 things, then you can honestly revere, respect, preserve all life in any given situation. But again, situations are very unexpected and variable. Can't make any assumptions up front. So when I'm applying technique, fencing, sparring, free fighting, real fighting, de-escalation even, I apply these 4 stages of reaction. See if this makes sense to you. The way this works is it's a tier system. You got to start with the first one. And then if you maintain the basic concept function of the first one, you could advance to the next one And if you do that well, you can advance immediately to the next one, and then maybe to the next one. But if anything goes wrong on the chain, you've got to go back a step or two. All right? What do I mean? Step 1. Evade. It's one of the simplest things you can do. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean just running away. It could also mean trying to de-escalate the situation in other ways. But physically speaking, when we talk about maneuvering, and we talk about measure and other concepts in other videos, staying out of reach, unless you're talking about a projectile weapon, learning to move freely and use your environment and be able to stay out of reach. Just get yourself out of harm's way. Now, there are people who will say, you know, if there's a threat, you just run away. Well, ask yourself, honestly, can you? Are you that good at running? And then given the environment you're in, yeah, are you going to get trapped, cornered? Any other surprises that you might have to deal with? Can you evade? And when we talk about measure in other videos, it's really just starts with a matter of staying out of reach. Doesn't mean actually fleeing the scene entirely. But yeah, check your measure, check your distance. We'll talk about this in a lot of other videos. All right. If you've got measure kind of sussed out, then you can proceed to the next step. The next stage of reaction would be to establish contact. Now, this comes from not only my training in fencing, but my training in certain empty hand arts, specifically Praying Mantis. The idea here is this is where you kind of get into measure and start exchanging blows or blocking attacks. Again, if you feel like you can't block an attack, step back to outside of measure and evade. See if you can block, parry, bind, grapple, whatever it happens to be. But you're trying to make contact and maybe return a few strikes, counter strikes. You make contact with your opponent. Now, one of the things we're going to take a look at in terms of functional application of martial arts is where establishing that contact, whether it's an empty hand contact or a grapple or a bind with a blade or something like that, gives you something that your eyes can't give you. Gives you a feel of your opponent, how strong they are, how fast they are, and actually can give you warning about how they're going to move before you can see it. This is something we'll show in other videos. But the idea is that contact is then a bridge. Now, certainly you can make contact with another person that ends the fight, but nobody's going to be counting on that in this priority chain. It's kind of a happy accident. The idea is you use contact, if you can, to get control of your opponent. And that control has many flavors that we'll talk about in other videos. It could be a matter of creating an opening in their guard, deflecting their attack. Some place where you can get a hold of them or get through their guard and strike a better target. Think about things you do with binds and wedges and disengages and things like that in fencing. Okay? From evasion outside of measure to contact to control. Now, this can also be various kinds of, well, larger concepts of control, taking a person off balance, affecting their momentum, ways you can diffuse their ability to strike back at you effectively. And that then gets us into psychological concepts of combat, which we'll elaborate on later, I promise. Where you can take a person basically off balance or influence them in many different ways. But evade, contact, control. If you can get control over your opponent, then you can get to, hopefully, possibly, Stage 4. Now, Stage 4 might actually be Stage 3. Maybe just controlling your opponent is enough. Maybe you can grapple them, bind them, tie them up, disarm them, or basically show them that, you know, you're screwed. There's no point continuing. But that is a form of the fourth stage of reaction. Fourth stage of reaction, well, kind of has a dark name, but we're going to take it at face value. And the word is neutralize. Yeah, it certainly has some dark implications. Evade, contact, control, neutralize. Now, what does the word neutralize really mean? It means to render neutral. Diffuse the threat. Okay, so that could be lethal. That would certainly open you up to other kinds of threats. It could be grappling, immobilizing the person. It could be disarming them. It could be injuring them in some way that they cannot continue the fight or discourages them from continuing the fight. Or it could be psychological de-escalation to discourage them from continuing the fight. Doesn't have to be crippling or killing move to neutralize. Depends on the situation. Go back to those 4 priorities, right? If you're good at protecting yourself and defending other people, then maybe you don't have to. Yeah. But it depends on the situation. Now, again, at any stage of that chain, if you moved from evasion to contact, but you can't get to control, you might have to back up a step. Or you've got to control, and you're looking for some kind of finishing, disabling, disarming, or immobilizing move to get to neutralize, and the person slips out of your grip, you lose control over them. Yeah, you might have to slip back to contact. You might have to slip all the way back to evasion. And we'll demonstrate that in future videos. But the idea is that chain, for me, makes sense. So, did that make sense? Was it helpful? Let's get that conversation going in the comments, and yeah, this will probably be reflected on in future videos. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back for more.